Story of the World, Volume 2, The Middle Ages, Chapter 10, The Bottom of the World, Part 1, The First People of Australia. We started our story of the world with the fall of Rome. If you have a globe, put your finger on Rome in Italy and move east or right. You'll come to the Byzantine Empire. Go south or down from the Byzantine Empire, and you'll find yourself on the hot sandy peninsula of Arabia, where Muhammad gathered his followers into the Islamic Empire. Go east again from Arabia, over into India, and you'll be in the land that once belonged to the Gupta dynasty. Keep going east, and you'll be in China. Go all the way over to the Pacific Ocean on the far side of China, and you'll find the most eastern countries of all, Korea and Japan. Now go south from Japan, down into the Pacific Ocean. You'll bump into an enormous island called Australia. This island is so big that we call it a continent, or a large landmass. There are 7 continents, or huge areas of land in the world: North America, South America, Antarctica, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia. On most maps, the continent of Australia is down near the bottom of the world. When the Guptas were ruling in India, and the Tang were ruling in China, and the Yamatos were ruling in Japan, no one was ruling in Australia. The people of Australia were nomads. Instead of living in houses and villages with one king ruling over them, they lived in small groups that moved from place to place, hunting food and gathering plants. No one knows where these nomads came from, but their own legends say that they had been in Australia from the beginning of the world. Today, we call these Australian nomads Aborigines, because the Latin words ab origine means from the beginning. Let's imagine the life of an Aboriginal boy more than 1,000 years ago. Rulu lives in a clan, which is a group of people related to each other in the south of Australia. Rulu calls all of the men in the clan father and all of the women mother. He has 36 grown-ups who can tell him stories at bedtime and spank him when he puts mud in his sister's hair. The clan fathers began to teach Rulu how to hunt a year ago when he was 7. At first, they taught him how to fish in the ocean. Rulu loves fishing. The last time he went fishing, he helped to catch 2 huge sea cows. Rulu's mouth still waters when he remembers those fresh slices of raw meat with chunks of blubber balanced on top. But now, the clan has moved inland, away from the water. It is the dry season and food is getting scarce. Late one night, Rulu catches a bat, and he and his sister cook it over a fire along with a handful of moths. Roasted moths are Rulu's favorite snack. They taste like crunchy, furry nuts. But there aren't enough moths to fill his stomach. In the morning, he is hungry again, and so is the rest of the clan. So Rulu and 2 of the fathers start out very early in the morning to hunt for food. Before they leave the camp, they coat themselves with a paste made out of mud and the ashes of last night's fire. The paste will cover up their human scent so that the kangaroos won't be able to smell them. Then they start off for the nearest waterhole. When they get there, they find kangaroo tracks all around it. But the waterhole is almost dry, and Rulu knows that they'll need water before the hunt is over. So he helps the fathers dig down beneath the waterhole. He scoops mud and dirt with his hands until his hole is so deep that he has to lie on his stomach and reach down into it. Finally, his fingertips brush against something hard and cool. Rulu whoops with joy. He's found a water frog. He wrestles the round, dark frog out of the hole. In the raining season, the water frog soaks water into its skin and swells up, and then buries itself deep into the sand until the dry season passes. This frog is almost as big as Rulu's head. He holds it up and squeezes water from its skin right into his mouth. Now he's ready to go hunting. Rulu and the fathers track the kangaroos through a forest of scrub and brush. Soon they glimpse movement. The kangaroos are in a brush ahead of them, nibbling the tender leaves from the low branches. So the hunters dig a deep pit in the hard red earth and cover it over with branches and leaves. They search out the freshest, newest leaves, cut them, and pile them on top of the pit. Then they back away into the bushes to hide. Rulu crouches on the ground without moving for hours. Sweat runs down the back of his neck. His left foot goes to sleep. But he knows that he must stay very still. Nearby, the fathers are standing motionless, holding branches in front of them. They look almost exactly like trees. Rulu holds his breath. He can hear the rustle of a kangaroo. The big brown animal hops slowly into sight. It pauses, sniffs the air, and then bends its head down. It sees the fresh leaves. It takes another hop towards the food and crashes down into the pit below. Rulu and the fathers haul their catch back to the camp. Another hunter has trapped an emu. The women have been working hard all day and have caught a whole potful of lizards and snakes. There will be a feast tonight. Soon the rich, warm smell of roasting kangaroo meat and cooked snake fills the air. Rulu eats and eats until he is so full that he can barely move. He curls up near the fire and listens to the fathers of the clan tell stories of the dream time, that long ago age when spirits still lived on the earth. But Rulu has walked miles and miles today, hunting kangaroos and water frogs, and he can't keep his eyes open. Slowly, he drifts into sleep. In the morning, there will be cold snake meat for breakfast. Part 2. The Long Journey of the Maori. Australia may be near the bottom of the world, but if you put your finger on Australia and keep going down, you'll bump into two islands that are even closer to the bottom of the world. Today, these two islands belong to the country of New Zealand. Aborigines have lived in Australia for as long as anyone can remember. But the first people of New Zealand, the Maori, came to their islands for the first time during the Middle Ages. By the time the Maori arrived in New Zealand, Beowulf had already been written, Justinian and Theodora had finished their reigns, and the Gupta dynasty had already driven the barbarians out of India. By the time the Maori arrived in New Zealand, the Aborigines of Australia had already been in their country for thousands of years. Although we don't know for sure, we think that the Maori sailed to New Zealand from far out in the Pacific Ocean. If you go east from Australia, you'll find a little scattering of islands so far away that they're halfway to North America. These are the Polynesian Islands, and the people who lived here were great explorers. They built canoes from enormous trees and made sails from coconut fibers, which are the tough white strings on the insides of coconut shells woven together into cloth. On these canoes, they sailed out into the Pacific Ocean. They ventured out into the deep ocean, so far out that they could no longer see their home. They fished for sharks and for other huge fish that live in the deep ocean. And they searched for new islands. They packed their canoes with pigs and chickens, with fruits and vegetables, and looked for new shores where they could settle and live. Usually, the Polynesian islanders settled on islands that were only a few days' journey away. But one day, a group of these explorers just kept on sailing. They sailed until the Polynesian islands disappeared into the distance. They sailed for weeks with nothing but empty ocean in front of them. The pigs grew restless. The chickens got seasick. The fruits and vegetables got eaten. The men and women on the canoes strained their eyes to see into the distance. Surely, they said to each other, we will reach another island soon. One morning as the sun rose, they saw something long and white lying on the water far ahead of them. It must be a cloud, they exclaimed. But as they drew nearer and nearer, they saw that the white cloud was actually two huge islands, bigger than any islands they had ever seen before. They landed on the shores of the northern islands and decided to stay. From then on, the Maori called their new home Aotearoa, land of the long white cloud. As the Maori explored the northern island, they discovered mountain after mountain, jagged rough valleys, and deep gorges cut down into the earth. They told this story to explain the shape of their new country. Once upon a time, a great hero was born into a big family. His name was Maui. Although he was brave and strong, he was the youngest of many brothers, and his brothers didn't want to play with him. "Take me hunting with you," Maui would plead. "No," his brothers would answer, "you're too little." "Take me swimming with you." "No, you're too little." "Take me fishing with you." "No, you're too little." One day Maui got so tired of this answer that he climbed aboard his brother's canoe with his fishing pole and hid. When the canoe was out in the middle of the ocean, he popped out of his hiding place. "Here I am," he announced. "Now I can fish with you. Give me some bait." His brothers looked at each other, annoyed. "No," they said. "No bait. You can't fish with us. You're too little." But Maui was determined to fish, so he threw his hook over the side anyway. And while his brothers caught little, useless fish, Maui hooked the most giant fish of all. A fish who lived at the bottom of the ocean, a fish so huge that when he began to pull it up, the sea began to boil and heave in protest. "What are you doing?" his brothers yelled. "Are you trying to kill us?" And they leaped to their feet and began to hack and chop at the giant fish with their meres, their sharp-edged wooden clubs. As the giant fish rose up to the surface and the sun shone on it, its body became earth. Because the brothers had chopped and gouged it, the earth was full of mountains and valleys. And this new earth became known as the Fish of Maui. In the language of the Maori, Teika a Maui. Teika a Maui is the Maori name for the northern island of New Zealand. And although the story of Maui and his enormous fish is just a fairy tale, New Zealand did rise up out of the sea. The islands of New Zealand were formed when volcanoes rose up out of the seabed below, spewing lava and hot ash. The lava hit the seawater and cooled into stone. As time went on, soil collected on the stone and formed an island. Teika a Maui still has 3 active smoking volcanoes on it, along with hot springs, which is water heated by underground lava streams, and hot pools of mud that bubble, pop, and steam all year long. Perhaps the Maori people were trying to describe this eruption from beneath the sea when they told the story of the Fish of Maui.